Hello, I'm Joe Foster. Let's talk about real street fights. Over the next series of videos that I create and share with you, I'm going to be discussing some concepts, principles, and practical self-defense solutions that you can apply on the street in real fights, as well as some defensive tactics knowledge that you may find very useful. This particular video is going to take a look at the bar scene or nightlife, because in the bar scene or nightlife, quite often violence and lots of fights come hand in hand. Now, you may have noticed at the start of this video a picture of some pretty girls in the thumbnail as well as the video itself. I promise you that this is not clickbait. These girls play an integral part in our story that I'll share with you later in this video. So, what can an old guy like me possibly offer you in terms of practical street fighting knowledge? What qualifications do I actually have about this topic? Well, first of all, I'm approaching this as a very experienced martial artist. In fact, I've been teaching martial arts since the 1970s. I opened my first commercial martial arts school in 1982. I've trained in and taught numerous martial arts systems to thousands of students, from beginners to high-ranking black belts over the decades. I've also had the pleasure of teaching in many different countries in North America, in Europe, in Scandinavia, and in the Far East. For my martial arts experience, creativity, leadership, knowledge, and ability, I've been inducted and nominated 13 times into 10 different martial arts organizations' International Black Belts Hall of Fame in Canada, the United States, and Europe. From a defensive tactics perspective, I've also taught countless security guards, frontline police officers, and a police ERU unit, or emergency response unit, what you would know as a SWAT team. I also have significant first-hand tactics experience, having managed security in numerous bars for many years in my past. While in these bars, I've been directly involved in thousands of conflict resolutions and removals, as well as hundreds of real fights. Thus, what I can offer you comes from both knowledge and first-hand experience with regard to real street fights. Just before we continue in this video, I should point out that I teach the advanced martial art of Kenjute. To find out more information about this dynamic, very practical martial art that works for everybody, you can watch a number of videos on Kenjute International's YouTube channel, as well as the Kenjute Facebook page, or you can visit the website for more information at www.kenjuteinternational.com. Now, like all social media videos, please take the time to like, share, especially share, because your friends might even benefit from this too. Follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all those things that you need to do, because it helps us grow and encourages us to make more videos just like the one you're watching.
Hi, I'm Mark Cameron. I used to work security for many of years in different bars here in London and outside of London. I used to work for Master Foster. He was my boss. Pretty cool guy. I used to work for him at Robinson Hall, Thorny Devil in Club Rouge. Master Foster treated all customers that would come in very fairly. They all liked him, but they all knew that if they crossed the line inappropriately, that they shouldn't be messing with him. I know that he's been in over hundreds of incidents in the bar where there's fights, but one that really sticks out to me the most is, so this one night a guy I was working with at the front door, he got bottled by a customer, and then next thing you know, out of nowhere, I just out of the corner of my eye see Master Foster come flying in, and he just lays this guy right out. So if this guy's gonna give you any advice about fighting, I'd take it. He knows his stuff.
Unfortunately, violence and bad behavior is commonplace in the bar scene, quite often spilling out into the street by way of fighting or just bad behavior. Alcohol, drug use, loud music, trying to impress people from the opposite sex, trying to impress your peers, all of these contribute to risky behavior, bad behavior, just obnoxious behavior. The fact is, nice people can turn into something quite different if they've had too much to drink. Back when I managed numerous bars from 2004 to 2011, along with a bit of hotel security, I worked every weekend. That meant I did somewhere around 800 bar security shifts. Robinson Hall, Thorny Devil, had a capacity of just under 600 patrons. Club Rouge which opened as a third location by the same owner, had a capacity of just over 800 patrons. Robinson Hall was an older business demographic, Thorny Devil attracted a younger crowd, and Club Rouge was a magnet for university and college students. In a 7-year period, Robinson Hall and Thorny Devil had over 8,000 removals and more than 750 fights. Club Rouge, unfortunately, was a real fight zone. I don't have those stats available, but I can tell you it was not uncommon to have 15 to 20 fights in a shift. Fights that are initially started between two customers or multiple customers can change very quickly when security steps in to break it up. And what happens a lot of times is these guys that are fighting turn around and start fighting security, either not realizing who they are or probably the fact that they just don't care. They're angry and they're swinging. Even worse, their friends quite often jump in and start fighting too. So if you're a security guard and you've worked for a long time in a bar, you've been exposed to a lot of real violence and real street fighting.
Hi, my name is Nick Preston. I've been with Master Foster for almost 20 years. Started out as a student, worked my way up to black belt. On top of that, I've also worked with him in doing security at bars. Some of the bars that we've worked at together were Salt Lounge, Robinson Hall, Thorny Devil, and Rouge. As well, there was a bar in St. Thomas that asked us for some help, so that was Legends. So I've been quite a few places thanks to being with Mr. Foster. Through the working at the bars, I ended up becoming one of Master Foster's supervisors, and that gave me the chance to see the behind the scenes, all of the organization, setting up policies and procedures, getting the rest of the staff trained, to make the whole establishment that much safer for everyone involved. Through that, a lot of the other bars started to see what was going on, and they asked Mr. Foster to come and do sessions with them, and he ended up actually making it into a national magazine talking about bar security. Well, at the bars, we had thousands of removals and hundreds of fights. Master Foster was involved in countless removals and fights alongside us, if not leading them himself. I can remember there was one night where 2 police officers were trying to make an arrest down the street. Master Foster and I wandered over to see if they needed a hand. Master Foster asked the 2 police officers if he could lend a hand helping them make the arrest. They said, sure. Within the blink of an eye, Master Foster had the person wrapped up in an arrest position for the police officers to make the final arrest on. It was amazing to see, and I think they were pretty impressed too.
Most security guards hired to work in bars receive no conflict resolution training and no defensive tactics training. The truth is, most bars hire guys as bouncers because they're either big or have a reputation for being tough. Because of their lack of training, the result, quite often, is more fights and lawsuits because goon bouncers beat people up. I wanted the bars that I managed security in to be very different, so it began by creating policies and training for better safety of staff and customers. I also started hiring security guards based on specific task requirements instead of hiring big goons. To start, like all bars in Ontario, our staff participated in Smart Serve for alcohol consumption and monitoring skills. I also formed a joint health and safety committee and created a special training manual for the entire staff, covering WHMIS training, job-specific expectations and safety training, violence in the workplace nightly task sheets, and so on. Now, many of the girls who worked in the bar expressed an interest in learning some self-defense because quite often they are abused. Thus, I go back to the start of the video where you saw a picture of those pretty girls. They were servers and bartenders who worked in our bars. And so we decided that Kenjute would offer a ladies' defense fit class specific for them. They had a lot of fun, they learned some basics, and they loved to ham it up for some pictures, as you can clearly see. For our security guards, who all eventually had to be licensed by our provincial government, I established a complete mini training course covering more than 60 security considerations and procedures. We required uniform dress codes, safety gloves, earbuds and headsets, portable cameras, logbooks, and handcuffs for those who are certified. De-escalation training, elevated sight lines, hand communication signs, specific radio communication codes specific to our bar, ID checks, proper pat-downs including use of metal detectors, threat positioning, violent customer flanking, removal procedures calibrated to match the threat, customer escorting lockout techniques, a series of locks, takedowns, and control moves, all being consciously aware of the issues like positional asphyxia and excited delirium. I did share some of my developed security with other bars and nightclub establishments through a series of seminars. The Safety magazine also took notice of the work that I did for our establishment and featured us in a health and safety magazine. We also did detailed end-of-shift nightly security debriefings with the security team where we reported tracking removals, fights, injuries, staff positioning, and any other noted details, as well as specific incident reports for more serious situations. These stats saved the bar owners on many occasions from frivolous lawsuits and other liabilities.
Hi, my name is Brent Trudgeon, and I worked with Master Foster doing security at Rouge, Robinson Hall, and Thorny Devil. Over the years, there were thousands of removals and a lot of fights. I witnessed firsthand Master Foster dealing with these altercations. So I can tell you Master Foster knows about real fighting. There was one time at the bar, Thorny Devil, at the rope line, that a guy wanted to get in and I wouldn't let him. So we had an altercation and he pushed me and I flew back and he was huge. And so I came at him, I still bounced off of him, and Master Foster came out of nowhere, locked him up and took him down, and everybody was very impressed.
Now, I don't want to leave you with the impression that the bars I managed were fight dens. They really weren't. They were great bars. The owner did a fabulous job building really classy places. And it filled up with wonderful people. The vast majority of customers were great. It was only that handful that we had problems with all the time. The point that I would like to make here is that in a martial arts school, in a martial arts competition, in a ring, in an octagon, you fight people of your own weight class, not in real fights. You know, if you're in a street fight or if you're in a bar fight, you might fight somebody who's absolutely huge. So that's something to consider. In a ring, in the octagon, in a martial arts competition on the floor, you fight one person, not in a bar. You'll probably end up fighting multiple people. So that's something that you gain experience in as security guards working in a bar. Now, if I got $1 for every time somebody said to me, "You don't know who you're messing with," you know, I would go up to a customer, they were causing a problem, I would say, you know, it's time to go, or they're in the middle of conflict and I was trying to resolve it, and they basically, "You don't know who you're messing with." The funny part is, they didn't know who they were messing with. Anyway, one story from me, Tim, one of our guys at the back door controlling ground entry into Robinson Hall from the Thorny Devil, came down one night and there were 3 guys beating him up. And they were really going at it, and they had him pinned up against a glass wall, and they were driving his head into the glass, which had the metal grids in it, and the one guy had a hold of his chain and was choking him. So I had to jump in right away, pulled the one guy off, and I took him down and took him out on the stairs. And when I'm trying to pull this other guy off of Tim, who's got a hold of him and driving his head and choking him, I pushed the third guy away, and when I was pushing the third guy away, my hand slid, and my baby finger, he turned and put it in his mouth. He tried to bite my finger off. Well, if somebody's gonna amputate my baby finger, all bets are off. So I had to take a break from Tim for 1 second. I drove my fingers into this guy's eyes. He screamed, I roundhouse kicked him out the door, and he dropped and went back and saved Tim's rear end. That's not something to be proud of, but that's the reality of fighting. It's not like you're preparing for a match where you're all psyched up and you go in. Sometimes you walk into it and you have to react immediately. what about real fights? As a security manager, I had to deal with violent patrons in one-on-one situations, multiple attackers, and group fights en masse. Sometimes these fights would have 30 people in them. I was forced to apply locks, strikes, chokes, takedowns, ground skills, and arresting applications depending on the situation and, of course, to match the threat level. Sometimes violent perpetrators had to be rendered unconscious by applying different types of strikes and chokes. And this is only when they were seriously trying to kill you or put you in the hospital. More serious threats included dealing with patrons high on drugs. They're always a challenge to deal with. Stabbings, we had a number of stabbings either with knives or bottles. A shooting, 8 feet away from me, a guy got shot. I was involved in a number of gun disarms, knife disarms. People often fighting with bottles. They don't just simply fight each other, they reach for what's at hand. Fighting with bottles, smashing them over your head. You know, sometimes you'd have a guy locked up and he would get bottled and you'd end up wearing his blood. They would throw chairs, they would use chairs, and any other object that basically they could get their hands on. These encounters, and you have to understand this, were never in ideal conditions either. This wasn't in a dojo in a controlled setting. Varying environments can certainly impact how the situations are handled. You know, when you engage customers around furniture, or if you're falling down on broken glass around the dance floor, if you're on slippery floors because of the alcohol spills, if you're fighting on stairways, in alleys, in hallways, if you have to deal with bad situations in bathroom stalls, when you're dealing, the light's never the same either. What about the flashing lights on the floor and the deafening noise on the dance floor of the speakers, which makes it super hard to see and hear what's going on between the lights and the noise. And sometimes you're outside, in snowstorms, dressed in winter clothing, in rainstorms, fighting in super confined spaces, maybe in a booth, and around moving cars. And, you know, chases, they were all examples of things that I had to face. Another factor was the emotional atmosphere. Trying to deal with bad patrons when their friends and spectators interfered was a real challenge. Attempted intimidation and threats by bad customers were commonplace. I can tell you firsthand that being in the middle of a large, angry mob is a very dangerous situation to be in. Applying technical skills in varying environments and atmospheres was not enough. You know, I was forced to properly respond and succeed through distractions, pain and injuries like being covered in perpetrators' blood, their vomit, scratched, bit. I had torn ligaments, I had my share of bruises and cuts, falling onto objects, falling downstairs while struggling, trapped in group piles, being pepper sprayed in the face, struck with weapons on the head, a metal rod. Each situation presented its own set of challenges and resolutions. Happily and luckily, I never lost any of these real fights. Applying proper techniques to match the threat levels and ensuring that while dealing with these violent perpetrators, they, you, staff, and bystanders were not injured. That was the goal. For me, these engagements proved incredibly valuable in determining what martial arts skills actually work and what are just fluff, flash, fantasy, and a bunch of crap. Real fights do not last for minutes. They happen in seconds. Individuals and crowds lose their sense of responsibility as tempers flare and adrenaline flows. They don't care about the consequences when they're in the middle of a fight. Seldom are fights one-on-one. Swarming and buddies jumping in to help have become the norm. Quite often the fight will end up on the ground, so even though you may be on the ground and you've learned some little ground moves and you got a hold of the guy, there's a good chance that you're going to get kicked in the face or bottled by his friend. Objects found in your pockets can cause damage when you're falling too. The ground is never padded, it's not like a dojo or in a ring, and often it's cluttered with debris. People use any item they can get their hands on as weapons. No two fights are ever the same. 30 seconds is an eternity in a real fight. How you prepare in a martial arts school will determine your chances of success in a real fight. So if you're in a school that is only doing cooperative training or never training on a partner, your chance of pulling off a technique is very slim. You need to have scenarios training where you have to face pressure. That's very important.
My name is Will Williamson. I worked for Mr. Foster in 3 separate bars, Robinson Hall, Thorny Devil, and Club Rouge for a number of years. We definitely had our fair share of altercations at this bar in terms of breaking up fights and removing unwanted patrons. I learned a number of lessons from Mr. Foster through that experience working for him. One was his ability to bring a presence to a conflict situation that allowed him to treat people with respect but de-escalate the situation while still having that intimidation factor that people knew he was serious and you didn't want to mess with him, or you'd end up on the ground, you'd end up controlled. For a little bit of a story, I remember a time where we had a patron who needed to be removed from the bar and he was giving us a little bit of trouble. Mr. Foster stepped in. He ended up grabbing a rear hammerlock and hooking this individual by the nose and dragging him out by the nose. And I had a comical moment when I was watching this because there was a woman who was at the bar and she ended up screaming in surprise, like, "Oh wow, he's got him by the nose." And it was quite comical, but still real practical experience.
Yes, there really were thousands and thousands of violent situations, but I'm happy to say about 90% of those were solved by de-escalation skills. That's a verbal skill set and a distancing skill set that you have in order to solve the problem without resorting to violence. Now, what do I mean by that? Everybody has a story. Everybody wants to be respected. Show the person some empathy. Give them a little time and space to calm down. That's how you get a successful removal. Whether you're in security at a bar, you're a police officer trying to deal with someone who's stressed out, if it takes longer for them to calm down, so be it. And, even in a street fight situation, if you can use your words and de-escalate the situation and keep your distance, you might have a better chance of success. And all of those fights in the bars, that's not the ultimate goal of fighting to solve a fight. The good removals from a bar never used our hands and our feet, we used our words.
Hi, my name's Denzel Lewis. I worked with Master Foster at Robinson Hall, Thorny Devil, and Rouge. Over the years, we were taught martial arts called Kenjute. We did some security at Robinson Hall, and we've had a few altercations there. Just maybe say a few thousand. We had quite a few fights. I do remember one situation we had. There were 6 guys. Master Foster called me outside and said, "Come on, Denzel, just you and me go." And I took one gentleman down. Then I was working on my second one. I turned around. The other 4 were on the ground, and I went, what the heck just happened? He goes, "What's taking you so long?" I just laughed. I went, "You do you." So I can confirm, personally, me, if he tells you something when it comes to self-defense, I would listen.
You should never go out looking for violence and to commit violence. Those people who do generally end up meeting somebody who's a little bit tougher than they are. The bars that I worked in from 2004 to 2011, those some 800 shifts that I did, in a weird sort of way, ironically, gave me a living laboratory to see what actually worked in terms of self-defense, to match threat levels, one-on-one, one-on-many versus weapons, fighting in a controlled situation, fighting out in the street, and so on. It certainly influenced how I altered and refined the Kenjute martial arts system, and many of the skills that I taught the security guards back then are part of the Kenjute system today. Now, there are a lot of martial artists out there that you see on the internet that will stand up and tell you this is how you defend yourself. But you want to know the truth? Most of those guys have never been in a real fight in their life. And so what they're giving you is theory. And it doesn't mean to say what they're saying is wrong, but because they've never experienced it firsthand, they really sometimes show some things that are just a little bit obscene in terms of trying to make it work for real. It's not realistic for a 90-pound woman to throw a 250-pound man. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic for a lady in a business suit or whatever wearing high heels to throw a roundhouse kick to somebody's head. It's not going to happen. So I can tell you that Kenjute is a practical martial art based not only on almost 50 years of martial arts experience, but through these hundreds and hundreds of fights, I bring real fight knowledge to the game. So if you get anything out of this video and future videos that I'm going to share with you, please remember, don't go looking for fights. Follow these 4 rules we teach in Kenjute. Spot the danger by anticipating it before it happens and avoid it. Your words are your best weapons. Talk to de-escalate the situation. If you can, walk away from physical violence and create space and time for that de-escalation. If you have to fight, make sure you defend yourself to match the threat level, because you know what? Life is precious. As this video comes to a close, I'd like to leave you with a few quick points. First of all, don't think that I'm about violence. I'm actually about peace. And I also don't want you to think that I'm some kind of invincible tough guy. I'm just a long-time martial artist who was exposed to a lot of fights working in the bars for all of those years. And luckily, I never got seriously injured. But I can tell you, it's not the physical cost that can affect you being in the middle of hundreds and hundreds of fights. It's the emotional cost that it can cause. And this is quite common for people in warfare, in policing, and in long-term security work. You can become somewhat detached and emotionally callous to the situation, almost what's known as compassion fatigue. You burn out. So suddenly, when you're in yet another fight and breaking up another jerk to arrest or whatever, it can really wear on you. You know, in one of my last shifts, I'm in my 50s, I'm at Rouge, there's a massive fight. I jump in and I take this one guy and I pin him over a cement barrier, and he's trying to take my head off. And as he's trying to take my head off, I have a hold of him and I look down and I find that I've taken my finger and I've rammed it partway into his eye, and I'm about to remove his eye. And at that point, I just stopped. A lightning bolt went through my body, an epiphany hit me, and I thought, wow, it's time to get out of the bars. And so did I rip his eye out? No. I stopped. I yelled, stop. He stopped. I picked him up. I dusted him off. I should have thrown him out of the bar, but I didn't. Instead, I bought him a drink and let him stay. You know, I'm an old guy, a father, a grandfather. If I can leave you with anything out of this video, it's this. Be nice to people. It will come back tenfold. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, follow, and all those things. It helps us out a lot. Thanks.